Netherborne Book 2. Author, XKARNATION. Welcome to Netherborne Book 2, an epic continuation of a thrilling journey through a world teetering on the edge of darkness and light. Prepare to be transported to a realm where heroes and villains clash, ancient secrets unfold, and the fate of entire civilizations hangs in the balance. Join our protagonist as they navigate treacherous landscapes, forge unexpected alliances, and confront unimaginable challenges. Get ready for a gripping adventure filled with suspense, mystery, and the relentless pursuit of power. Let's dive into the captivating world of Netherborne. Victor awakens in a new world with a body taller than the trees, composed of pure darkness and far too many eyes. He had become a Netherborne, a legendary creature from the void that does not tire nor die. Instead, they consume all that lives until there is no more. Legends say when a Netherborne is summoned to the mortal plane, civilizations that stood for centuries are toppled overnight while their nobles evacuate to the seas. As a being from the void, the world fights his existence. However, resistance is futile, the prey can only run. But what happens when a human mind inhabits such a creature? Does only destruction await, or will there be a new age of civilization? Victor is about to find out. Prologue. Another trash novel finished. Guess I'll leave a 3-star rating. Victor was a regular reader of any and all reincarnation light novels on trashnovels.com and actively moderated the site. Right time for my 1000th review on this shitty website. While pondering what to write, Victor reached over to retrieve a potato chip and leaned back into his chair. There was a slight creaking sound as the chair defied his weight. Down chair, need to get a new one. Victor grumbled as his hands drifted quickly over the keyboard, illuminated by his 2 screens and the moonlight coming through his half-open curtains as he furiously typed away. As the connoisseur of light novels in the field of reincarnation, Victor liked to leave extensive reviews on what could be improved in an already written story. Why are all these protagonists so dumb? Do they all think with their other head? How does he even have a harem by the 2nd chapter? He read out loud as he typed away. A gentle voice whispered, "Do you think you could do better?" The voice had a mischievous tone to it. Music blared in his ears and Victor was still busy typing his review and, therefore, was not fully paying attention. "Of course, I could do better," were the last words of his review instead of an answer to the question given by the mysterious voice. "Hee, confident, aren't we, little one? So why not give it a go?" The voice persisted and Victor simply snorted, "Am I finally going crazy?" He checked if the song had changed on his YouTube tab, but his music was all normal. He had listened to the same lofi hip-hop beats for the last 10 hours. "If you could start over, would you?" Victor instantly straightened his back and looked around his dark room. He grabbed a ballpoint pen on his desk and held it in a reverse grip. The room remained silent for a while and Victor gulped. Finally, he humored the voice and answered, "If I could leave this shitty life behind and live like these protagonists, I would have done so long ago." The room remained pin-drop silent except for the whirling of his computer fan. "I finally went crazy." Victor slumped back in his chair and stared at his screens. He suddenly felt exhausted. Victor rubbed his eyes and stifled a yawn as he pressed submit on his 1000th review. Feeling content with himself for finally finishing every reincarnation novel on the website, he lay back in his chair. "Why do I feel so tired?" he muttered while taking a sip of his energy drink. Then, he watched in shock as his hand lost all its strength and the can fell to the floor. His head rolled to the side and he used all his effort to stay awake. Yet, nothing could prevent his eyes from closing despite caffeine surging through his veins. Victor felt something was terribly wrong, but he had little power to stop it. For the first time in his life, he felt genuinely helpless. "Am I having a heart attack?" he thought as he clutched his chest. The sudden mechanical female voice and flirting text furthered his feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. "Congratulations, mortal, you have been chosen." And then his vision went black. Victor floated within an unknown space for a long time. Then something seemed to pull. Gently at first but slowly getting stronger. "Welcome to my realm." A girl appeared before him from the darkness. Her face was blurred and distorted, but she had a feminine figure. "I am so glad you accepted my offer." What offer?" Victor said, but no sound came out of his mouth. The distorted shadow girl tilted her head in confusion. "But you said you could do better than all those before you." Victor thought hard. Was she referring to his review? Or perhaps she was that voice he heard before arriving here. Wait, before me. Yes, all those supposed stories you read actually happened. I am a goddess of reincarnation and am here to send you to a new world. That just makes it even more disturbing. Victor blurted out. He didn't believe this girl was a goddess for 1 second, nor that all those stories he had read actually happened. You are telling me that the Blacksmith Hareen novel I just finished was a historical account of real events? The self-proclaimed goddess sidestepped the question and continued her speech unimpeded. Anyway, it's time to pick what to be reincarnated as. With a clap of her hands, a blue screen appeared before Victor. He scrutinized the screen and a disturbing realization washed over him. It was an actual blue screen like the ones from all those novels involving stat pages. I am being sent to a game world. The shadow girl nodded. Victor returned his sights to the screen. It was a long list of races with numbers next to them. Okay, so first, I need to select a race. What do these points next to them mean? Oh, oops, I forgot to mention you have 10 points to spend. Certain races cost more than others. The points can also be used to buy skills, so spend wisely. Dragon at 10. Vampire at 10. Angel at 10. High Human 8. Human at 5. High Elf at 8. Dark Elf at 7. Elf at 6. Beastman, multiple options available, 2. Dwarf at 6. Can I ask questions about the world? Victor said toward the goddess. The hazy figure seemed to smirk at him as if enjoying his predicament, and her tone became a little venomous. No. I already gave you thousands of stories worth of information, yet you still ask for more. Classic greedy humans. I will only answer questions involving races or skills you have never seen before. However, I will say the world you are going to has magic, and you will start as a baby of whatever race you choose. The goddess laughed. Although some races start more mature than others, so choose wisely. You have 10 minutes to decide, or I will choose the human race for you. Victor frowned as he looked over the list. After a while, he began mumbling like a crazy person. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough time to deeply consider each option, so he just summarized his thoughts on each. Considering all those light novels about reincarnation are real, I have an extensive database of knowledge to pull from. First on the list, dragons. An excellent choice at first glance. Apex predators with high magic resistance, muscular bodies, and long lifespans. More powerful dragons can also transform into humans and roam cities. But before obtaining a human form, I would have to sleep in a cave and eat animals and monsters raw. I could be killed by other dragons for entering their territory. Famous adventure groups will come knocking to kill me for my scales and the title of being a dragon slayer. But by far, the biggest disadvantage is starting as a baby dragon. I would be nothing but a glorified fire-breathing lizard and would need to eat and sleep for hundreds of years before I could survive easily on my own. However, if I can't find anything better, I guess dragon would be a good choice. Victor quickly moved on to the next on the list. Vampires have an infinite lifespan, are very powerful, and look similar to humans. But with their power comes far too many drawbacks, such as weakness to silver, sunlight, holy and fire magic. Even bodies of water and locked doors may be an issue if religion is prevalent in this new world. Also, I would have to do everything at night and never be able to leave a castle or something. Angels. The holy magic and wings would be incredible, but I don't want to be worshipped everywhere I go and forced to hold ceremonies for the church, so nope, moving on. High humans and normal humans have the same issues. If given a chance, why live a similar life to the one you already had? Sure, I will have cheat-like abilities to make my life easier, but I always dreamed of being something greater, like a dragon that's way cooler than a dull human. Also, humans have a shorter lifespan than the other species on this list, if not the shortest. Victor then twisted his face in disgust, and there's no way I'm going through breastfeeding again, or God forbid having to swallow blind food that is so prevalent in medieval fantasy worlds. Becoming an elf seems like the most viable option here on paper. Extended life, good at magic and archery, and extremely beautiful. While also being rather similar to humans. That's until you remember they are often captured and sold as slaves in almost every story ever written, or the fact they live on nuts, berries and fruits while deep in the wild away from any type of civilization. I would go mad. Same with beastmen. They are also often treated like shit by humans. They have short and harsh lives, so yeah, that's a no. Dwarfs are rated at 6. Now that I think about it, they are always the most technologically advanced race with advanced systems like indoor plumbing and are usually on good terms with all the other races by providing weapons and services. Not to mention their affinity with earth-based magics and smithing. Are they not also super strong, immune to poisons which causes their ridiculous alcohol tolerance and live for hundreds of years? If not for their short stature, living in caves and dirty lifestyle, they could make an excellent choice. Victor spent another few minutes thinking over the list, but they all had something wrong with them, and when given a choice, he always preferred to pick the best one. I like dragons, but I was wondering if there were other options. But unfortunately, his time was running out, so he decided to take his shot. The goddess sighed. You are the first person to ask me that. Most just choose to become a dragon or high human. There are other options, but I never bothered to show them since they are less desirable to human reincarnators. The previous list phased out of existence and a new one took its place. Slime is 0. Spider is 0. Goblin is 0. Gnome is 0. Wolf are 1. Lizard man is 2. Troll of 3. Centaur of 4. Mermaid of 4. Victor's eyes scanned down the list and he scoffed. Nope, these are all too weak. Even having 10 points left over to spend on skills can't compensate for how weak and slow these races evolve. Sure, there are stories of super strong slimes or goblins, but it took years and immense luck, even with overpowered abilities, to get strong enough to defend themselves. Before going back and picking dragon or high human, Victor asked the goddess, are there undead or spirit options? Sure there are, but why would you want to be an undead? Again the screen changed to reveal what Victor had been looking for. Skeleton is 0. Wisp is 0. Ghost are 1. Zombie are 1. Mummy are 1. Banshee are 2. Ghoul are 2. Living armor -3. Deathlock are 4. Lich -5. Dracolich are 8. Netherborne are 10. Victor felt like he preferred these options. At least they were far better than becoming a spider or slime. Since the goddess said I would be reborn as a baby, I was planning on becoming a lich since there is no such thing as a baby lich, but there seemed to be 2 better options. Why a lich? They are immortal and do not need food, water, or money. Any work I need to accomplish can be done by my raised minions. Also, in the stories I read, undead MCS always seem to overtake nations. A Dracolich seems to be a dragon that turned itself into a lich, similar to how a human can become a lich. I guess it would be just a giant bone dragon. Goddess, what is a Netherborne? I have never heard of one before. The goddess seemed hesitant to answer, as if that option wasn't supposed to be available, the most powerful undead in existence. My better judgment tells me to go with my original plan and pick lich, but why is Netherborne valued twice as highly as a lich, the supposed king of the undead? Even a dragon turned into a lich is cheaper than the Netherborne. Can you tell me anything else about Netherborns? Victor pleaded with the goddess, but she shook her shadowy head. No. I would also prefer if you didn't pick it. Victor ignored the goddess's warning. If she didn't want him to pick a super overpowered race, it had to be perfect for his plans. Do I start with any abilities? Language understanding and any innate abilities to the race. For example, spiders would have a poison fang ability and elves have wind magic. Victor stared at the options for a while before coming to a conclusion. Okay, I pick Netherborne. Something about that unknown race called out to him as if it was his destiny all along. Really, you sure? You can't pick any abilities then since it costs 10 points. Even though I can't start with any abilities, I'm sure I can obtain some later. Also, considering there are creatures like dragons that are way stronger than lichs, my life won't be 100% secure if I choose lich, but if I am an undead at the same level as a dragon, then what could go wrong? Yeah, no problem. Make me a Netherborne. Very well then, best of luck. Upon his final words, the world went black as his consciousness faded away for the second time today. Chapter 1. Escaping the Void. A creature lurked outside a world's barrier in a golden lightning cage within the vast void. It had remained lifeless for a long time, constantly in stasis of existence. The ethereal whispers of the void couldn't awaken the creature from its eternal slumber. Titanic horrors that shouldn't exist casually floated by with curious glances with their many eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars. The old ones knew to avoid it, and the younglings would soon learn. The cage was in a constant state of orbit around the world. Never moving between star systems like those ancient predators that lurked nearby, the cage was to both contain and protect its prisoner, as some void creatures would love to consume such a notorious creature. For the first time since its creation, the cage showed signs of sentience as it pulsed and allowed a soul entry. The dormant creature of shadows raised its head. "Where the fuck is this?" Its voice was ancient, older than the distant stars. It sounded like many things talking at once, and manner carried its words far through the expansive nothingness. Just from his words alone, Victor knew he was no longer human, not to mention no human could survive floating out in space like this. He felt as strange, odd, confused. No adjective in the English language could describe being suspended in nothingness. He could tell his body was huge, but it was hard to tell without a reference. His thoughts were cloudy and dull, as if downloading an update. Something squirmed around in his skull, building walls and sealing something. It was all very confusing. But then everything snapped into focus. Victor was somewhere as something, but he could finally think. His brain whizzed as ideas of his situation flew past. That goddess never told me my mission. His voice sounded old as time, nothing like his previous teenage voice cracks. A frown formed on the Netherborne's face. From his memories, if the protagonist was never provided with a purpose, such as defeat the demon lord, then there were more nefarious schemes behind the scenes. Why would an all-powerful entity kidnap a random soul and give them preferential treatment? The void rumbled as what can only be described as an eldritch blue whale floated below the cage. Before Victor could even react, a force smashed into the cage, and it didn't resist. Instead, it flew down toward the giant blue planet below. A barrier seemed to surround the planet. It was so dense it was visible. Victor silently screamed in his mind as he hurtled towards it. Then, right before impact, a small gap formed. The cell opened up and pushed him against it. The hole was merely a few meters wide compared to his titanic size. Yet the cage, an unknown force, did not relent. He was compressed and squeezed through. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Victor had expected to fall from the sky. Instead, the tear in the world's barrier created a gap in reality that he crawled through. Then, with a pop, it closed behind him, sealing him from the void he had awoken in. Victor was in a crouched position as he glanced at the floor. There was something Victor could only describe as a cultist ritual circle, although it looked old and abandoned. Victor stood up, stretched his body to its full height, and looked around himself, or he tried to but was already confused. Firstly, the ritual circle was covered in foliage. The tattered clothes surrounding the ritual helped hide the rotting bodies of long-dead humans. Victor felt nothing despite the horrific sight. Only cold thoughts occupied his mind, mainly the objective of the goddess. If she cared about the planet, there was no way she would allow a creature such as himself into the world. So, what is her plan? His ancient voice remained the same, but it lacked that gravity it had in the void. He could hear a sudden rustle as animals scurried away from him in all directions. So I was enormous in the void and still on. Victor scrutinized his surroundings. Unless the trees are tiny here. I am tall, disturbingly so. Victor reached out to touch the top of a nearby tree but paused. His arm was no longer made of flesh and blood. Instead, it was some kind of shadowy mist that evaporated with every passing second, and at the end were claws, easily a meter long each and made of dark metal. All right, let's see what I'm working with here. Status. Name, Victor. Race, Netherborne. Level, 1. STR, 999, DEX, 999, Con, 999, Int, 999, WIS, 999. Race information. Skills. Aren't those values a little high for a level 1? Victor worried as he read the stats that appeared in his mind. Anyways, pushing that aside, let's check out the race information. Netherborns are sentient undead nightmares from the void. They are artificial and malicious and recorded to take pleasure in the corruption and suffering of others. They are creatures known to end civilizations when summoned and have immense control over the powers of darkness. Few have feasted their eyes on their true forms and lived to tell the tale, but a few records claim they stood taller than a large barn with bodies of shadowing mist and lethal blades. Netherborns are unnatural beings rejected by the world's energies and therefore consume life force to remain on the mortal plane. Notice, to maintain form in the mortal realm, one stat is lust per second from each stat category. So that explains why the trees seemed small. I'm larger than a barn, so maybe more than 6 meters tall. But more concerning is that last notice. Victor quickly rechecked his stats. STR 939, DEX 939, Con 939, Int 939, WIS 939. It's only been a minute, and I have already lost over 60 stat points in each category, so 300 in total. So doesn't that mean I only have around 15 minutes to live? In a dull panic, Victor opened his skill menu. Consume X. Raise Undead X. Shadow Magic X. Annihilating Aura X. Freezing Cone V. Stealth X. Doom Ray X. Spirit Movement 3. Shit, I don't even have time to read my abilities. That can wait. I need to find prey to kill while my stats are still high. If the world had become a video game, Victor was certain he would gain more stat points with each level up. He was only level 1, after all. Victor started to run in a random direction, but much to his surprise, it seemed Netherborn were incapable of simply walking. Rather, they floated or flew to move. This will be a massive advantage in combat, Victor said as he made no noise or vibrations and could also change direction instantly instead of turning and giving away his movements to an opponent. While floating through the forest like some grim reaper, he turned on his annihilating aura. Any creature within 30 feet of Victor died instantly. This seemed an effective method for killing all the insects hiding amongst the soil and trees. Level up. Level up. Level up. Level up. A constant pain seemed to gnaw at his brain. The pain was similar to hunger but left Victor feeling like he was withering away. Despite leveling up multiple times, Victor's stats were still decreasing by the second. Thinking for a moment, he decided to read the first skill description, Consume, absorb nearby lost souls for life energy. Realizing what he was doing wrong, Victor activated Consume, and tiny blue wisps started flying towards him and were absorbed by his shadowy body. Victor could feel the life energy enter his body, but it was quickly used to maintain his form. Even after killing hundreds of bugs, Victor had only really stabilized his stats at around 1,000 each. Then, desperately looking around, Victor saw a small green man with a wooden pole and rags covering his junk hiding in a bush. Is that a goblin? Victor wondered to himself. Victor floated over to the green man. Despite being directly in front of the little monster no taller than his claw, the goblin completely ignored him as if he was not even there due to his maxed out stealth skill, but it seemed to sense something was wrong. Its instincts hinted of incoming death. The forest had suddenly gone deathly silent. The usual hum of insects had vanished and been replaced with a chilly stillness. So the little green man decided to run. Victor simply followed behind with a wicked smile. Victor had disabled his annihilating aura to not kill the little goblin. But, as everyone knew, goblins were not solitary creatures. They are like rodents and breed like crazy. So all I need to do is follow this little goblin to his nest, and then my rapidly lowering stats issue could be resolved for a while. It was quite a terrifying sight if anyone could see it. A small 1-meter-tall goblin was running with a fearful face while a barn-sized shadow monster of death silently floated behind it like some stalker. This poor little goblin will regret bringing his tribe to extinction in his next life. Chapter 2. Race Against Time. Time was running out and there wasn't a goblin tribe in sight. Since Victor had to turn off his annihilating aura while following the goblin, his stats were in free fall as he couldn't top them up by conducting mass extinction on the insects in the near vicinity and harvesting easy stat points. As a result, he ran on borrowed time and constantly checked his status with a nervous twitch, ready to topple his annihilating aura the second he got too close to death, which was an odd thought since he was supposed to be undead. Name, Victor. Race, Netherborne. Level, 5. STR 399, DEX 399, CON 399, INT 399, WIS 399. With every passing second, he got weaker and weaker as he rapidly consumed his stored life force to remain on the mortal plane. His stats ticked down like a final countdown to his demise. However, the goblin didn't know this and ran as fast as his little legs could take him back to his tribe. A place it thought was safe. Victor was seriously about to have an anxiety attack as he looked around the forest. What was the point of being an all-powerful being if he only had a lifespan of 4 minutes? Maybe I should have picked the dragon. Victor wondered, but then remembered he would have been reincarnated as a baby of any race he picked. Although his lifespan was short, he could always toggle on his annihilating aura at the last second and survive off killing the insects as he moved. Even though each one only gives me around a single stat point, there's so many crawling around the foliage that I should be able to somewhat survive off their life force alone. The problem was Victor didn't want to just maintain his current strength. He had been reincarnated into a creature with infinite potential that grew stronger the more it killed. That much was obvious with their consume skill letting him grow from slaughter. Shrill screams echoed through the forest, causing a slumbering lookout to straighten up and rub the sleep from its eyes. With its peaceful dream ruined, the goblin lookout frowned at the culprit. It was supposed to be another relaxed day on the job. The goblins had made their new home this far south for the very reason of avoiding their predators. But the lookout was left speechless as he witnessed one of the strongest hunters from the tribe scampering toward the wooden fence with tears flying from his face. What scary predator this far south could make such a dignified and seasoned veteran goblin run and feel like a newborn child? Did the humans come back to invade the forest again? Or perhaps a wraith spooked him? But then it all went silent, much to the lookout's confusion. The goblin hunter ceased screaming and his head slumped down. He seemed to have just suddenly stopped mid-step and was floating in the air, a meter off the ground. A second later, a vast black being materialized behind the goblin, with one of its claws going straight through the goblin's ribs as if it was a kebab on a skewer. The colossal monster, that was over 3 times the height of the wall the lookout current trembled upon, was disinterested in its kill. Instead, it silently let the body slide down its claw onto the floor with a thump. Then the monster vanished again as if it had never existed. The lookout rubbed his eyes, questioning his sanity. But no matter how much he slapped himself, the dead body of the goblin hunter remained face down on the floor in a pool of blood. With his sleepiness gone and his hands shaking in fear, the goblin lookout turned to scream a warning to the rest of his tribe, but no sound came out except gargles. Finally, intense pain overwhelmed his mind, his vision blurred as his head fell to the floor. Then, in his last moment of consciousness, the goblin saw his decapitated body slump over and 6 glowing blue eyes staring at him before the creature vanished again. After floating over a small hill, the goblin's tribe built inside a depression in the land came into view. It was similar to a little human village. There were some primitive wooden walls, and he could see a single goblin yawning on top of the wall. That must be the lookout. Well, no time to waste. I only have a minute left of life force. Not even bothering to use a skill, Victor stabbed one of his claws through the goblin's body. He wasn't sure about the amount of force needed, but he definitely went overboard as his claw went through the goblin's body with ease. The lookout seemed to notice his presence and turned to shout something. Using shadow magic that came instinctively to him, Victor sank into the ground and reappeared from the goblin's shadow. With a precise swipe from his claw that was bigger than his target, the windpipe was cut clean so no sound could be released. Victor knew he was far more powerful than a goblin, but he had yet to test what having such low stat points entailed. With these 2 kills, he had recovered to around 100 in each stat point, but could a stray goblin arrow kill him? Victor didn't plan to find out and approached this like a covert operation until he worked out his opponent's strength. Now that Victor was hovering on the wooden wall, he quickly recast his stealth skill and observed the surroundings. The goblin village was bustling with activity, with around 100 small wooden huts. Most of the people weren't armed. Only a few goblin warriors dressed in crude leather armor and wielding stolen human blades far too large for them strutted around the mud streets and showed off to the hideous female goblins. It seemed Victor's caution was unnecessary. They were not prepared for an attack, and he couldn't see a ranged weapon in sight. Feeling confident, Victor floated down and made his way through the streets. However, due to being over 6 times the goblin's height, it felt somewhat awkward to make his way to the village center. Once in the center and surrounded by goblins, Victor activated his annihilating aura and an instantaneous wave of death mana rippled out from Victor's location. Every goblin it touched just died where they stood. Those that were mid-step tumbled face-first into the mud. Others died with their eyes wide open as they sat in their huts. Due to the village being rather spread out, he didn't catch every goblin in that attack. However, those outside his range seemed to notice something was wrong, and shrill screams filled the air. Victor hated the noise, so he activated Consume, and hundreds of wisps gravitated toward him, topping up his life force. He then used a spirit movement to float through the houses standing in his way to kill off those still alive. The goblins screamed as they died to an unknown enemy. Then, some more intelligent ones started randomly thrusting their spears into the air, hoping to kill the invisible foe. Some even threw their spears like javelins and hit Victor, but they passed right through. To Victor's surprise, this wasn't even due to a spirit movement. Deciding to turn off his annihilating aura and his spirit movement, Victor let the goblins thrust their spears at his body. When they hit his claws, the spears sometimes broke or got deflected, but when they hit his body, which was a shadowy like mist, they passed right through as if he was a ghost. So I am immune to physical attacks. Victor laughed to himself, and all the goblins fell to their knees in terror. Deciding to get serious, Victor activated his skills and made sure no goblin escaped. After 10 minutes of slaughter, the screaming finally stopped. Victor floated alone in the middle of a silent village once home to a few hundred little green people, but now was a ghost village with hundreds of cold bodies spread around. Feeling a little evil from the sight, Victor decided to see the rewards of this endeavor to cheer himself up. Name: Victor. Race: Netherborne. Level: 27. STR: 15,342, DEX: 15,342, Con: 15,342, Int: 15,342, Wis: 15,342. The goblins, on average, had around 50 stat points in total, most of them being in strength, all of which he absorbed through his Consume skill. Victor ran the maths and discovered a harsh truth about his existence. All of that for only 4 hours of life force. Around 300 lives wreaked for only 4 hours of life. What kind of insane war crimes do I need to commit for some peace of mind? While looking at one of the goblin bodies at his feet, a simple prompt was shown in his vision. Rise. A slight smirk appeared on his face. If he has to commit war crimes, might as well do so with an army. Chapter 3. Generic slave girl. The constant swaying of the carriage and the sickening smell of human feces broke Alice out of her quick nap. She lifted her aching body off the floor and sagged against the frigid wooden walls. Only a few rotten holes in the walls allowed for airflow, giving Alice a sense of time. However, judging from the moonlight, it was definitely still nighttime. Ooh. Alice buckled over to throw up, but nothing came out. Her rumbling stomach refused to offer her anything other than some foul-smelling spit that dribbled down her chin. Alice rubbed her stomach with her spindly thin fingers. Wiping the vile dribble off her chin, her head lazily rested on the freezing walls. She was hungry, cold, itching from the dirty rags, and downright miserable. She was once the daughter of a wealthy merchant from a small kingdom called Eshna. But on her 18th birthday, she was blessed by the spirit of darkness. Unfortunately, her life fell apart after that. Her beloved family sold her off to avoid a scandal with the church in the kingdom that worshipped all spirits but decided the spirit of darkness was evil. They accused me of being a psychopath just because I strangled a rat to death for fun the next day. Alice mumbled to herself as a grin formed on her face. Since that fateful day, something about death and the afterlife theory fascinated her. Had the blessing corrupted her? According to societal standards, she was insane, but she rejected that notion as she could see the truth. They were all blinded by their zealous faith, but she had seen the other side. After being sold to slave traders for 3 gold coins, she was on a month-long journey around the cursed forest. Quite the contrast between her cushy life as a merchant's daughter to a potential sex slave within a day. Alice had heard stories of those that tried to brave the cursed forest and navigate its treacherous paths. Many tried going straight through the forest to cut weeks off their travel time, only to never make it out alive. The forest was so dangerous that prisoners were often set free inside, only for the criminals to beg to be locked up again instead of being left for dead. Alice was currently being transported to the much larger country on the other side of the cursed forest, simply known as the Empire. It was around 3 times the size of Eshna but didn't wage war due to the obstacle of the cursed forest. While Alice was falling asleep again to try and escape the endless pain from her empty stomach, there was a shout outside her carriage, although the exact words were muffled and drowned out by the noise of the wheels turning. Then something massive seemed to slam into the other side of the carriage. A loud bang shocked Alice from her half-slumber, and a wave of dust and wooden splinters flew at her. Her ears rang as the carriage toppled onto its side with a massive hole exposing the night sky. Alice's head slammed onto the floor, the world was spinning, and she felt sick. A head poked its way through the hole and glared at Alice with hungry scarlet eyes. Alice could only shiver from being eyed up like a piece of grub. The colossal wolf wasted no time and started destroying Alice's metal cage with its huge metallic claws. Sparks illuminated the dark space as Alice covered her eyes. Over the sound of the wolf's claws tearing apart her metal cage, Alice could hear her captors shouting out orders. "Monster attack, men! Everyone gather around me!" "Boss, the slave carriage is being attacked," one man said in a very panicked voice. Although these merchants were planning to sell many goods to the Empire, the slaves were worth the most, especially the girl blessed by spirits, Alice. However, Alice wasn't blessed for a reason. She knew this was her one chance to escape. She had been starving herself for an opportunity just like this one. She could slip her bony wrists through the metal shackles chained to the floor with a lot of effort, leaving friction burns and scrapes along her raw flesh. With her successful escape from the bindings, she waited patiently for the wolf to finish obliterating her crude iron cell. Her chance to escape would be slim, but she believed she could do it. Fire! An arrow rammed itself into the demonic wolf's leg, causing it to scream. Then, with its berserk status evoked, it ignored the tasty snack and charged the merchants. With all her strength, Alice climbed on the still-hot metal bars and pulled herself out of the toppled-over carriage. For a brief second, the pleasant night wind accompanied by a sky filled with beautiful stars gave Alice a sense of joy. Until the seriousness of the situation set back in. Thanks to her stealth skill from her blessing, she could temporarily slip past the distracted wolf only a meter away, growling at the formation of merchants wielding spears. But unfortunately, that was the limit of its capabilities. The merchant's eyes followed her as she crept behind the wolf and began sprinting away. Looking around desperately, she could only seek shelter in the cursed forest. Hesitant for a second, she decided it would be fine so long as she stayed near the edges. The monsters get stronger the closer you are to the center. She repeated like a mantra in her head. Alice ran, almost tripping over herself. The sharp forest floor pained her bare feet, and the cold night wind was relentless on her body, which was only covered with thin rags. Blood dripped from her wounds, alerting nearby monsters of a potentially injured and easy meal. She reached around 100 meters into the forest before hearing the men chasing and calling after her. It would seem the wolf has lost already. Alice cursed as she increased her pace. Her breath left clouds of fog as her lungs burned from exhaustion. The merchants were hesitant to chase the girl into the forest, but they had paid 3 gold coins for the girl and were unwilling to lose that investment. Because of the chasing men, Alice was forced to go deeper and deeper into the cursed forest. She was surprised she hadn't been eaten yet, or she would be if not for the hundreds of dead bodies already lining the forest floor. What kind of monster among monsters was she currently following? Alice didn't know, nor did she want to find out. Chapter 4. A Monster's Depression. Who would have thought being a world-ending monster would be this boring? The twin-headed snake with black draconic scales that could rival the size of a bus let out a screech as Victor slowly sliced it into well-measured pieces. Despite my cruel actions, I feel nothing. Nothing. Victor grabbed the snake's head in his metal-long claws, leaving long incisions. The monster's beady eyes shook with fear as if pleading for its life. Days, weeks, maybe even months have passed. The beautiful green forest has withered away to a wasteland of bare trunks and frost-covered ground, the same scenery, all day, every day. Same monsters, over and over. I feel nothing, and nothing changes. Victor shook the snake as it took its final breath. Speak to me, anything, do something. I can't take this insanity any longer. Freezing cone. The snake was flash frozen as its blood dyed the ice red. Victor floated next to the twisted ice sculpture and sighed. Status: Name: Victor. Race: Netherborne. Level: 281. STR: 259200, DEX: 259200, Con: 259200, Int: 259200, WIS: 259,200. These numbers are pointless, just like everything else. Months of slaughter for 3 days of life. After seeing the creatures that lurked in the void below, such measly numbers on the screen meant nothing. My true form should still be below the surface somewhere. I feel this is merely an avatar, a pathetic mimic of the real thing. For fuck's sake. Victor's ancient voice boomed through the empty forest. Apart from the hundreds of ice statues containing various S-rank monsters surrounding him, there was nothing except dead trees and frost-covered rocks. I don't know how Netherborns usually act, but there's no way putting a human mind in an undead was a good idea. I should have taken a different option. Something squirmed around in his mind, and the idea of making another choice seemed to vanish. Victor used his claw and made an incision on a tree. That marks the 10th time my thought process has been changed by something unknown. Goddess, what is your plan? Why am I here? Alas, there was no answer. Victor did not know where the nearest city was and did not intend to kill the entire continent to sate his endless hunger. However, he needed a long-term solution. Although the forest was enormous, easily the size of a country, Victor was slowly running out of high-value prey to hunt. The need to move was approaching, but where should he go? Clever bastards are avoiding me. Victor had raised an undead army during his few months of wandering. His conquest of the entire forest was inevitable. And then what? This question had been plaguing Victor's mind. He had no purpose. Unlike in the other stories, he was likely already the strongest monster on this planet. If his one aim in life was destruction and death, his chosen body was perfect for the job. I reached the end game, the legendary place where no novel has gone. So many epic tales remain uncompleted, while others abruptly end with a confusing ending, yet here I am, on the final frontier. The apex predator, the king of the dead. Victor looked at his cursed creations and watched as an undead goblin carefully navigated around them towards his location. This sight gave the ancient creature an idea. I should not seek destruction but rather creation. Of course. What else can the strong do than rule the weak? Victor looked to the left and right. He did not know the nearest city's location or wish to find out. He could invade with his army, wipe the city off the map and claim its riches for himself, and then what? Spend the endless gold on beautiful women, succulent food and rare booze. Construct grand palaces full of servants to tend to his every need. Useless, Victor muttered as he removed the thought. Of course, as an undead, he required nothing materialistic. Instead, companionship, entertainment and emotions were the most important to him right now. But how can a titanic ancient creature from the void acquire such things? Boss? HM. Victor turned to the tiny goblin undead. The poor thing barely reached his knee area and had to look straight up to meet Victor's many glowing blue eyes. Humans have entered the forest. Victor felt his non-existent heart skip a beat. At this point, a talking monkey would be a great find, so to hear that actual humans had stumbled into his domain was unbelievable. How many? The goblin counted on its skeletal fingers, 5 men and a woman. The situation. Men chasing the woman. Victor groaned. Cliché escaped slave scene. It seems very well, lead me there. Cliché of slave scene, sir. Never mind. Lead the way. As Alice stumbled through the cursed forest, 2 massive moons cast the forest in its ethereal glow. The cold floor made her feet numb, helping hide the pain from the rocks and thorns tearing her soles apart. Ah! She yelped as a well-hidden log slammed into her shin, sending her tumbling face first into a frozen-over puddle. Over there. A gruff voice shouted behind her. Alice glanced over her shoulder. A faint yellow glow from the merchant's candles illuminated the path towards her. Shit! She cursed as she pushed her weary body up again. With a stealth skill, the cover of the night, and a head start, Alice hoped her pursuers would have given up by now. But alas, the slave collar around her neck would direct her owner towards her so long as they were close enough. Trying to escape from range, she has no choice but to struggle further into the forest. Looking behind her, the yellow glow seemed to have suddenly vanished. She waited a minute to get her breathing under control. Minutes passed, yet the light never returned. Only total darkness greeted her and eerie silence. She walked back to where she had last seen the yellow glow. Had they left? Or did a monster get them? These thoughts swirled around the scared girl's mind. After 10 minutes of slow and painful walking, she arrived. On the floor were 5 bodies with large holes through their hearts. Blood was pooling out their bodies, forming a puddle on the forest floor. The glass box that had held the candle was smashed and lying on the floor, letting off a very faint glow as it was starved of oxygen under the glass pieces. Alice was overcome with emotion. First, she was glad the men had died, but now her situation truly settled into her. The adrenaline and rush faded away, and only cold terror remained. She was alone, without food, water, or weapons in the cursed forest. Alice slumped down with tears forming in her eyes. She was just a pampered merchant girl. She had no idea what to do. "Are you lost, little human?" An ancient-sounding voice came from high above her. Chapter 5. Humans are pets. Victor followed his goblin servant with newfound anxiety. How should I approach this? My maxed-out Erase Undead skill allows the dead to keep their memories. Interrogating information will be a breeze, so should I keep any of them alive? After arriving at a clearing, the goblin scampered off and left Victor with 5 gruff-looking merchants. One was constantly checking a crude compass that pointed towards the fleeing girl around 100 meters away. Merchants means there is civilization nearby. That at least confirms one of my questions. Victor watched the men silently for a while longer, but none of them suggested a high social status or a reason to keep them alive. "You will better serve me in death." The merchants jumped in surprise at the ancient voice, and one of them dropped their lantern, plunging the area into darkness. "Great dragon, we are sorry for trespassing dash." Dragon. Do they think I'm a dragon? How amusing. Since the merchants huddled together with 2 well-placed claws, all 5 found themselves without a beating heart. Eerie silence returned to the cursed forest. Victor relished for a moment his first human kill. It does feel different from slaughtering monsters, maybe because I still think it is taboo. How interesting. With his many eyes, Victor had an imperfect vision in all directions, but he still turned his head towards the fleeing girl. I don't have much time to waste since my stats are still falling, but watching for a little while shouldn't hurt. To Victor, this was pure entertainment, a twisted form of theater. There was a shocking lack of amusement in a silent forest filled with unintelligent beasts. Victor was curious how a local of this world would react to this situation. Does the girl know magic? Maybe the humans of this world cultivate like in those Chinese novels. The anticipation made him feel some emotion for the first time in months. Victor watched the girl stumble and fall through the darkness towards him. Interesting. Why is she heading toward her pursuers? Did I read the situation wrong? Once the girl entered the clearing and smiled at the corpses before breaking down in tears, Victor concluded, she is just a terrified girl. I guess I overestimated her. Moving deeper into the forest would be suicide, and it's hard to track where you are without night vision, so going back the way she came is only logical. Watching for a while, Victor debated what to do next. He wanted to watch her antics a little longer, but she looked near death. So here came the next issue. How can he help her? He could use the undead, but Victor wasn't sure she would see the undead as friendly. If he were alone in a forest back on Earth, nothing would terrify him more than a talking skeleton appearing out of nowhere. Victor took a deep metaphorical breath. He hadn't spoken to a sentient creature other than his undead since he arrived. Are you lost, little human? The trees rustled as his voice boomed through the clearing. Maybe I overdid it a little. The girl understandably froze. She reached for a nearby stick with calm and careful movements. Who? She choked back her tears and steeled her resolve as her fingers gripped a stick longer than a dagger and as sharp as a blunt butter knife. Who goes there? She shouted, her voice quivering. Come out. Please. Victor was floating right beside her with his stealth active. Do I show myself? Would she be able to comprehend my existence? Victor wasn't an eldritch being, but he did originate from the void and had many eyes and a massive body that towered over the tiny human. In her current mental state, showing myself would be counterproductive. Better to act ancient and indifferent. Maybe I could raise her like a pet. A sudden, fun idea crossed the monster's mind. Maybe I could teach the girl some magic. Can humans even level up with this system too? So much to find out. Don't be afraid, little one. I was merely passing by. Victor put on the persona of an ancient unknown creature, which was surprisingly accurate. The girl staggered back and leaned against a nearby tree, her legs wobbled and her body shook in the cold. Her matted black hair covered her face as she hung her head low. I am so tired, please help this pathetic human. Blood trickled down her bone-thin frame as she dropped the stick to the floor. Can you use the system, human? Before she died, Victor needed to know this fact. If she can, then saving her is potentially within my capabilities, especially if there is a party or shared EXP system. Yes, I can. She began moving her arm in the air. It used all her remaining strength, but a second later, a blue box appeared floating in front of her that Victor could also see. See, I can use it. Join party. Yes, no. So there is a party feature. Why doesn't my system have such a thing? Victor reached forward with a claw without deactivating his stealth and clicked yes. Blue screens displaying information rushed through his mind. Party formed of 2 members, Alice, leader, plus Victor. Name, Alice, leader. Race, human. Level, 12. STR, 30, weakened, DEX, 42, Con, 12, weakened, INT, 72, WIS, 56. Extreme hunger, extreme fatigue, bleeding, weakened, freezing, slave. Name, unknown. Race, unknown. Level, 281. STR 259200, DEX 259200, Con 259200, INT 259200, WIS 259,200. Life force unstable. Victor read the new pop-up with interest. Alice appeared to have high stats, especially in magic-focused ones like INT and WIS. It was also amusing that the party system didn't recognize him, likely because I'm a monster. Can monsters usually join parties? Before Victor could continue his line of questioning, Alice fell forward onto the floor and groaned. Victor realized his time to question was short. One last question: can party members harm one another? Area effect spells do not affect party members. Alice mumbled as she passed out. Without wasting time, Victor floated over to the merchant corpses and used to raise undead. Mana wrapped around the bodies before thinning out into the shape of a nervous system. Finally, the blue light faded away and the corpses began to move. Suddenly, Victor felt a bizarre feeling in the back of his mind. The constant static buzz of the undead army's hive mind transformed into clear and coherent thoughts. The goblins can talk. Why would adding a human undead to the hive mind cause such a reaction? How curious. With 5 undead humans standing at the ready, Victor wanted to ask some questions, but alas, the girl's situation was dire and needed immediate attention. Humans, you are merchants, correct? They all replied in unison with a resounding yes. Excellent. Is your merchant caravan nearby? Again they nodded. Go with the goblins, retrieve everything, including the wagons, and bring it back here. We will use the forest as cover from search parties and other caravans passing by. Without another word, the human undead moved to complete their task alongside a horde of goblins that had remained nearby. Victor looked at Alice, sleeping on the floor. See how lifeless and dull undead are. Don't die on me and turn into one of them. We still have much to do. Chapter 6. Looting the merchants. Victor watched the undead charge through the barren forest towards the merchant caravan. I wonder what wares they have. Perhaps some useful items I can utilize to make my pet's life a little easier. Victor paused for a moment at that thought. Why did he think of humans as pets? Then, looking down at Alice, he pondered, hard to take them seriously when they are so small. Even though I know they are intelligent, I just feel so superior to them. It's hard to imagine I was that weak. Look at her shivering in the cold and bleeding out from a few rocks and thorns, pathetic. She has lived her sad little life up till this point without knowing of the true horrors lurking beneath the surface. Even the worthless monsters that roam these lands would kill her by sneezing in her direction. How deplorable, how pathetic, how... Victor stopped. Something about humans instinctually annoyed him, and he didn't like that one bit. Anger, chaos and destruction clouded his mind, and it took this interaction for him to realize the situation. I am a creature engineered for slaughter. All my magic involves destruction, my mind urges me to pursue misery. Even my body forces me to act in such a way. All right, no more. I need a solution. Perhaps Alice will know a way. With another reason to keep Alice alive, Victor urged his undead to hurry up through the mental link. Wow, the link is so clear now. I can actually order my undead from afar. The constant static noise that had plagued his mind for the last few months had vanished and been replaced with a clear and concise communication structure. He could hear slight whispers and chatter along the network between the undead nearby, and if he focused in a direction, he could feel the presence of the undead further away. Perfect, my improvised network is now online. Victor had spent the last few months walking around in circles inside this endless forest. Without GPS and limited ability to communicate with his undead, he was left blind and had to float in one direction for days at a time. With his new connection, he could spread his undead far and wide and gain command over a large area. But why did adding humans affect the link so much? I could talk to goblins just fine once they died. Victor thought back to his many interactions with goblins. They were his favorite type of undead to raise, as they were the only ones capable of speech. Although limited and primal, once dead, they could carry out simple orders and report intriguing information back to him, such as the fact humans had entered the forest. Victor looked at his abilities, but apart from the fact his undead skill was supposedly maxed out, nothing else screamed out as being the culprit. When the goddess reincarnated me, she mentioned a language skill. Is that why the goblins can understand and talk with me? This was the only logical explanation. A language skill combined with a maxed-out raise undead skill gave the goblins the ability to talk to Victor. However, their INT was still relatively low, meaning their ability to send and receive magical messages over a significant distance was limited. It could also be a feature of the system. It recognized me as unknown in the party feature, so the skill struggled to connect so many unknown monsters together, as none of them is directly linked to the system. Goblin, Victor called out over the hive mind, and a nearby goblin ran over to him. Yes, boss. Are you linked to the system? System. The goblin seemed to struggle with the word as if it was foreign and outside their simple vocabulary. No, boss, I do not know of a system. Oh my god. Does that mean I am the only monster given access to the system? Is this a perk that came with my reincarnation? Or are the goblins too low down the food chain to be given access? Victor spoke to the undead again. No blue boxes inside your brain. No, boss. All I can hear is your voice and chatter from undead nearby. You can always hear my voice. No. When you direct your thoughts towards me, it booms through the void that connects us. There was still so much to learn about this new world. Usually, in stories, the protagonist would have a mentor or learn about the world through an educational institution like a magic school or public library. However, with the merchants appearing, it has been confirmed that a city or town is nearby. Should I sneak in? Would that be possible? Victor doubted any city defense could stop him, but should he even bother? If the girl somehow knows nothing, that could be an option. But I will wait and see for now. This is fun. Victor chuckled lightly as he floated around. I haven't had anything to think about for weeks. After mastering my magic to a certain degree and encountering most of the monsters in this forest, the novelty of it all wore off relatively fast. But with the prospects of encountering this world's civilization and seeing how it differs from Earth, that is the true charm of reincarnation stories. Discovering how humans can adapt to different environments, perhaps they will have invented games I have never heard of before. Despite his dull emotions, even Victor felt a little excited. Like that feeling of happiness and anticipation that makes you want to jump around the room or tell anyone who will listen about that awesome thing happening to you. Finally, something was going right in this world, and keeping his pet alive was the first step. Right on time, a horde of goblins led by one of the humans returned with essentials for Alice. Some high-end dresses, cloaks, socks, shoes, bedding, and even some dried beef jerky. Merchant, help the girl into new clothes and then follow me. We will set up camp for a while near my ice sculptures. As you wish, boss. Due to his maxed-out Raise Undead skill, the undead Victor commanded was the best of the best, with intelligence rivaling from when they were alive. The zombie merchant didn't waste a moment. Within moments, Alice had been stripped of her dirty rags, washed down with a cloth and carefully helped into a frilly noble-style dress. Victor doubted he could find humans attractive anymore, and her thin body killed any possible lust. I wonder if I will ever find love in this world. Victor pondered as the zombie merchant also showed no interest in the nude female and instead focused on completing the given task. After a few minutes, the former slave had transformed into an ill-looking princess in a stunning black dress, white leggings and flat-sole shoes. Not an ideal get-up for a monster-infested forest in the middle of winter, but at least she won't freeze too much. Eventually, the rest of the undead arrived, carrying the wooden carriages over their heads like ants. Zombies also pulled along a few terrified horses via their reins. They were far fatter than horses back on Earth, with tan skin and no hair. They could make useful mounts and a food supply for Alice until we work something else out. A light. Victor deactivated his stealth, and the struggling horse-like animals went dead silent as they gazed upon the towering creature of shadows. Victor swept his gaze across the large procession gathered at his feet. Follow me. To the ice sculptures. Zombies take special care of the girl. Chapter 7. S-Class Monsters. Alice awoke to dead silence. The familiar sounds of birds chirping away or wooden wheels creaking as they followed along half-trodden country paths were gone. Just cold, dead silence. Yet the ceiling was familiar, one of a carriage. Although it was clearly of higher make than the one she had been transported in, the wooden boards had a fresh lick of paint and a fresh wood smell that tickled her nose. That also smells good. She mumbled. A plate of beef jerky lay beside her alongside a full water skin. Feeling that familiar empty void in her stomach, Alice rolled over, ignoring the incredibly comfortable hay mattress she was lying on and reached for the tantalizing meat. She ignored everything. Even the beautiful dress that replaced her rags paled compared to the food. In recent weeks, she'd been fed nothing other than that sickening gruel those heinous merchants had force-fed down her gullet. The jerky was rubbery to the touch. Some light orange seasoning rubbed onto Alice's fingers as she rammed it into her mouth. Ooh. The meat tasted dry and sucked away all her saliva in an instant. While choking, she downed the water skin in a single gulp while gagging on the jerky. So dry, she exclaimed as she let out a haggard breath. But so bloody good. Without hesitation, she devoured all the meat and sat back on the bed in satisfaction. The food felt heavy in her stomach, so she tried to massage the pain away. Howdy. Alice shrieked at the skeleton that poked its head around the corner. It was a small thing, only reaching the doorknob. It was hunched over with 3 long fingers, a flat face, and 2 empty eye sockets that disturbed her as the skeleton awkwardly scratched its head. "Do and not BBA alarmed, Miss Alice." It slurred every word as if repeating the words of someone else. "I am here to help you." "What?" Alice crawled into the corner of the room and held her arms out in front of her face. After receiving the Spirit of Darkness's blessing, she researched the dead in the few days before being sold to merchants. She knew for a fact that an undead was incapable of speech, except for powerful lichs, but she was confident a goblin lacked the skills to become a lich. "How can you talk?" "By the power granted to me by the Mighty One." The Mighty One. Alice thought long and hard. Then, she vaguely remembered some disjointed voice speaking to her before she passed out, and a realization hit her. In a panic, she chanted, "Status." In her mind, a blue box displayed her status alongside someone else. Name, Alice Erlida. Race, human. Level, 12. STR, 30, DEX, 42, Con, 12, Int, 72, Wis, 56. Weak, slave. Name, unknown. Race, unknown. Level, 281. STR, 259200, DEX, 259200, Con, 259200, Int, 259200, Wis, 259,200. Life force unstable, out of range. Alice read through the stats in complete shock. Her breathing became ragged as she clutched the helm of her new dress till her knuckles went bone white. Mother told me that the strongest dragons reached level 100 and these stats are beyond odd. Not only are they impossibly high, but they are all the same. Is the system bugging out? Taking deep breaths, Alice massaged her temples as she contemplated her situation. She wasn't stupid. This unknown monster had kept her alive for some purpose. What does the lord or lady of this land wish from me? The goblin had waited patiently by the door and seemed happy with the question, Lord. The Lord only has one wish for now, which is for you to get stronger. Stronger? Alice tilted her head in confusion. Why would this lord require my strength? His stats are insane. Yes. Eat well, rest up and then train. I can help you. Despite its evident excitement, the goblin spoke in a monotone voice that grated on her ears. You will help me get stronger. Alice stood up and brushed the hay from her dress. Her legs were a little weak, so she had to steady herself on the wooden wall, and a few cuts here and there brushed against the fabric, causing her to wince and exhale sharply through her grit teeth. Alice glanced back at the status. It showed that this unknown lord was suffering from an ailment, unstable life force. She might have a chance to kill and escape if she discovers what keeps him alive. Another piece of information from the status that gave her peace of mind was that the lord was out of range, meaning he was at least over a mile away. She decided to keep the status open at all times. If the out of range debuff disappeared, she was no longer alone. Wait, I am a fool. This undead is under that lord's command. A necromancer or powerful lich can see through the eyes of their servants. Alice sighed. Whatever nefarious schemes this ancient necromancer had with her were beyond her control. Who was she to complain if this lord wished for her to eat well? Maybe he will even teach me the dark arts. That's it. He kept me alive because of my blessing from the goddess of darkness. He can be all-powerful, but necromancers can always appreciate a helping hand in managing their army. Right. The nice clothes, food, and even an undead servant suggested she was valuable. A small amount of pride welled up in her chest. Even if all these thoughts are mere delusions, it's not like I can save myself in this situation without at least investigating the outside. A girl such as myself, blessed with darkness, has one fate awaiting them in any human country. So long as the Lord doesn't grind me up into a pill or turn me into a zombie, my life here shouldn't be too bad compared to one as a slave in the Empire. Alice looked around the carriage. It was spacious with a bed of hay, a table and chairs, a weathered sofa on the far side, and a small ensuite bathroom that was no more than a hole in the floor that allowed one to take a shit while the carriage moved along. There was no shaking or noise, so they were stationary. Are we still on the road? Deciding it was time to toughen up and impress her new overlord, Alice walked toward the undead servant. Can I go outside? Of course, you can. The goblin moved to the side and fully opened the carriage door, letting in a wave of light, meaning hours had passed since she passed out. Alice stepped out and looked around. The carriage appeared to be in the middle of a goblin village that had been demolished and renovated with the most massive ice sculptures she had ever seen. The detail was incredible, some even had red shading to bring out the art. Where? Alice wandered to the nearest one to get a better look. It appeared to be a four-armed bear in a fetal position with its head in the middle of a terrifying roar. Wait, this isn't a sculpture. Alice stumbled back after the sun hid behind a cloud, reducing the glare on the ice. The actual sculpture was an A-class monster encased in ice with its head sliced cleanly off. Alice shuddered in a mixture of pure terror, and she was cold. Standing next to the sculpture reminded Alice of the massive freezer room at her family's estate. A flash of anger passed at the reminder of her wretched family. If she ever got powerful here and somehow escaped, she would visit them. Miss, do you know the name of these monsters? The goblin servant gestured with its three-fingered hand at the hundreds of ice sculptures populating the clearing. Maybe some of them. If they are famous ones, then most definitely. Excellent. The goblin smacked its bony hands together. Then, apart from recovering, the Lord would appreciate it if you could name all these monsters. A test of my capabilities. Alice wondered as she walked to the next one. No way an ancient necromancer at level 281 doesn't know the name of these monsters, right? Alice pointed at the sculpture she had just passed. That bear is called a four-leaf golden bear. The name derives from their golden fur that can be plucked off like a leaf from a tree and sold at high prices in auctions, and, of course, their forearms. A mother bear's fur is worth much more than the father's. How come? The goblin asked as it carved the name Four-Leaf Golden Bear into a wooden plank and placed it in front of the sculpture as if it was a museum piece. Simple, the father bear is called the Two Silver Bear. Their skin is molten silver that wraps around their form like a constant suit of armor. They are S-class, but the silver harvested from their corpses is very brittle. Nevertheless, they are so powerful that platinum-ranked adventurers have stopped hunting them altogether. Alice paused as they arrived at the second ice sculpture showing a bear twice the size of the first, and a distinct silver shine made the ice look breathtaking. "And this one?" the goblin asked, eagerly holding a blank plank. "Two Silver Bear." Chapter 8. An Undead Banquet. Despite the nippy weather, a thin sheen of sweat covered Alice's brow as she approached the final ice sculpture. Her entire body was racked with exhaustion, but she soldiered on as this was a task given by the Overlord. Just one more. She mentally cheered herself on as no one else would. She dragged herself before that massive piece of cursed art 1 foot after another. Sometimes the ice obscured or warped the features, other times there was so much blood Alice debated if there was even a creature inside. Alice impatiently tapped her foot as she examined every inch of the creature. It seemed familiar. As the daughter of a prominent merchant, she had seen her fair share of monster parts for sale. I recognized those pincers. The ice obstructs the dash. Despite her tight-fitting dress, Alice spun around towards the voice and stumbled back. "You?" One of the merchants that had abused the shit out of her stood dumbly, pointing at himself. "Me?" The merchant pointed a meaty thumb at its dumb face. "Yes, you. How are you alive?" Alice was shocked. She saw them dead, she was sure of it, or had it all been one terrible nightmare? Alive. The merchant looked down at the gaping hole in his chest. Ribs covered in rotting innards could be seen, and a foul stench wafted through the air. To further prove its point, the zombie twisted its right arm at an impossible angle, causing the filthy shirt it was wearing to tear. Finally, the arm snaked around its back, through the hole, and the zombie shook hands with itself through its chest cavity. Neat party trick, eh? The gruff man that had shoveled gruel that tasted like wallpaper down her throat gave her a grin that brought her anger to new heights. "You bastard." Alice pointed a wavering accusing finger at the zombie. "How just Fuck you. I hate you." Alice didn't care about offending the Overlord at this moment. She used the little remaining strength she had and did the most brutal kick she could at the grinning merchant's balls. The world seemed to slow down as Alice's shin made contact. There was a brief resistance, followed by the sensation of a popping balloon. The zombie and Alice stared in horror as the merchant's trousers darkened and some mysterious liquid trickled down his leg. Then, there was a mutual silence that stretched between the two for a long while, neither claiming to have enough social capabilities to understand where to take the conversation from here, as this was uncharted territory in the history of humanity. After a long while of cemetery silence, Alice couldn't handle the merchant's pained face a moment longer. "That. I am so sore. The zombie raised his hand to silence the blabbering girl. "I deserved that. I truly did. The name's Terry, by the way." The zombie offered his callous hand, and Alice stared at it. Before she knew it, her hand was in his grasp. It felt like a soggy potato, and they shook for a while. "Sad to see the old things go, but alas, I have little use for them in my current state." Terry sighed, but due to his lungs being well destroyed, it sounded like a bagpipe gone wrong. Also, his innards waved around in the wind, making Alice feel sick. "So, as I was saying," Terry began while Alice stared at the ground, trying to keep the vomit from rising. "The ice obscures this insect's wings which, from the size of the pincers, I bet has a slight grain tint. I would assume this is a giant flying green mantis if that is true." Alice grumbled at Terry's suggestion. It sounded correct, but there was no way to be sure as, unfortunately, something had sliced the poor creature into 10 pieces, and its wings were too thin to appear clearly through the ice. "The Lord has quite the impressive collection, at least 1,000,000 gold worth of monsters here." Terry mused while he helped the goblin hammer in the final signpost. "Some of these would be worth thousands by themselves for the meat alone due to the magical freezing keeping the meat somewhat fresh. But I wonder if the Lord ever plans to sell them. It would be a shame not to." "Have you met the Lord?" Alice carefully questioned. She kept a weary eye on her status, and her unknown party member was still far out of range. Terry nervously chuckled and chose to remain quiet. "Well, that is concerning." Alice wandered a little further from Terry. The stench was nauseating, and she wanted to keep her meal down at any cost. Speaking of meals, she was starving. "Is there any more food for me?" Terry nodded and gestured for her to follow. "Of course, my adorable hostage. I mean mistress. Us undead have no use for food, so take it all." Alice did not like any of those word choices. "So I am the only living person here. Does the Lord not need to eat? Also hostage. Mistress." While lost in thought, Alice accidentally bumped into the zombie's back, and some green gunk stained her dress and smelled downright rancid. "Sorry about that." Terry chuckled and continued walking towards a small group of carriages. "Easy for you to say," Alice mumbled as she tried to flick the sludge off while joining in a step behind Terry. He stood a head taller than her, but she could see through the opening in his chest. "I formally declare my undying hatred for zombies. Skeleton undead are so much better." Alice swore in her heart that she would never, ever raise a zombie even if her life depended on it. They reeked, looked weird as hell, and she did not appreciate their sense of humor at all. Or maybe it was just Terry who was the exception. Actually, where are the other zombies? There should be more, right? Unless the Lord did something with them. A shudder ran down her spine. Perhaps Terry was the lucky one. "Here we are, the kitchen. Built just for you, honey pie." Terry proudly spread his arms and puffed out his chest to little effect. "In here, you can find Bob." "Honey pie." Alice grumbled as Terry ignored her and made his way inside. Inside the dingy carriage walls was another merchant. "Hello, my name is Bob." His voice was as dull as his appearance, completely bone-white from head to toe. "Bob, I already love you," Alice professed as she saw a table with a freshly brewed stew. She tried to hide her absolute terror and kept her eyes away from Bob. How did he end up like that? He was meat and blood just like Terry only last night. "Nobody loves me." The short skeleton sat down in the corner, soulless eyes on the floor. "Burned me alive they did." Terry took this awkward silence as his chance to leave. "After you have finished with that scrumptious meal, feel free to join me outside. It's about time we delve into the forest and level you up." That statement caused Alice's jaw to slack at the grinning zombie. "You and me." Alice gestured between them. "Go into the forest." "Just the two of us?" Terry shrugged like it was no big deal. "Sure, why not? It's the cursed forest. Hello, we will die out there. Did you not see the monsters inside the ice? Those are roaming freely out there." Alice whirled around on her heel to Bob. "Yo, chef, back me up on this one." "Why?" Bob sunk even lower in his chair. "Why should I? Nothing matters. I feel nothing. The magnificent beard I grew for 10 long years will never return." Burned it away they did. Although Bob was one sexy bag of bones and a wicked chef, Alice was starting to prefer Terry's more upbeat personality that didn't remind her of watching paint dry. "It's the Lord's orders," Terry added before rounding the corner and leaving Alice alone with Bob and an irresistible stew of unknown meat. "Fine." Alice sat next to Bob and dug in. "Get eaten by a 4-leaf golden bear for all I care." She slurred through a half-full mouth of warm stew. "I'm already dead, remember?" Terry hollered back. Chapter 9. Cursed Forest Adventures. Alice sat upon a couch carried by 2 goblins. The traveling situation had baffled her at first, but after parading through the cursed forest in such style for a while, she had changed her opinion on the matter. The slight rocking from side to side as each goblin took a step forward upset her sensitive stomach, but she much preferred this bizarre form of transportation over walking endlessly for hours. The two had traveled in mostly silence as Alice was beyond nervous. She didn't believe that Terry nor the 2 goblins had sufficient combat ability to protect her against the monstrosities that supposedly lurked in the forest. Yet it's so quiet around here. If not for those distant roars, I would have believed I woke up in the wrong forest. Alice cast a nervous glance toward her rotting travel partner. He was slouching into the weathered couch cushions and looked ready to watch a theater production. They had barely exchanged a word since leaving the Overlord's ice sculptures, and the silence between the two was driving Alice mad, so with a deep sigh, she murmured, "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" Terry lazily replied from her side. Luckily, the wind was blowing eastwards, so Alice didn't have to deal with the nauseating stench. "Become a merchant. Sell people. Be an absolute asshole. Alice chucked her head to the side. You realize that selling people is fucked up. Circumstances, lady. Terry raised a weary hand in defeat. At first, many years ago, I too was hesitant about being in the business. But selling clothes and furniture wasn't cutting it when times got tough. All it took was one night of alcohol and poor decisions, and before you know it, you are a part of an illegal slave trading ring. Alice felt beyond bitter. Terry seemed nice enough, but memories of him stumbling into her carriage, reeking of booze and dumping an unwashed wooden bowl filled with lukewarm gruel through the iron bars refused to vacate her mind. Although he was now a zombie, Terry still had that roughish face with that constant smirk. She hated it. In an attempt to distract her weary mind, Alice summoned her system. Her brain lightly buzzed as blue screens that shimmered in the afternoon sun appeared floating before her. No matter where she looked, the screens always followed. Some zealous fanatics claimed these screens were a window into our soul, and honestly, I believe them to an extent. It's just a shame my soul has been dyed with darkness. Name, Alice. Race, human. Level, 12. STR, 30, DEX, 42, Con, 12, Int, 72, Wis, 56. Weak, slave. Blessing, darkness. Class, awakened black mage, luck 12 20th. Subclass, apprentice merchant. Divine mission, none. Skills, class skills, stealth 2. Further skills locked, subclass skills, fast counting IA. Identify IA. Getting bored of looking through the screens she had seen 1,000 times, she pestered her travel buddy again. How did your awakening ceremony go? Alice carefully inquired. It was a touchy subject for some and a perfect chance to brag for others. Not well, as I am sure you could guess. Terry sighed and leaned further back into the weathered sofa. This form of transport had been his idea while claiming Alice needed to rest, so walking for miles through the forest was out of the question. I wanted, like many kids, to become a delver. I was willing to be anything to follow in my pop's footsteps. We lived a good life with his earnings until you know the fate of most delvers. Don't live long, those reckless idiots. Terry spat some green gunk from his mouth, and it landed on the unsuspecting skull of one of the goblins carrying the couch. Surprisingly, it didn't react and kept walking along. Alas, I was one of the few to receive nothing. Alice frowned. Nothing. Not even a trading class or a divine task. Nope. Absolutely shit all. Drowned my sorrows in alcohol for weeks before my mother kicked me out, and now here I am. Dead but alive, serving an ancient overlord and helping raise his pet, I meant mistress. Terry gagged as foul-smelling gunk drooled from his mouth. Excuse me, being a zombie ain't all sunshine and rainbows, you see. Better than being Bob, though, poor guy. Anyway, it's not all bad. I finally got what I wanted, just not how I expected. Oh? Alice looked at the decaying and rotting man from head to toe. You sure? Looks aren't everything. Especially in a magical world. Terry winked a rotting eyelid at her, and Alice felt thoroughly uncomfortable and attempted to shuffle further into her side of the couch. Wait. Alice suddenly had an idea. Can you join my party? But Terry's groan sounded exactly how Alice had pictured a zombie to sound in her head. Maybe. I could while I was human, but I am nothing but a slave to the Overlord. Wow, that's a depressing thought, huh? Alice summoned the party screen, and with a swipe of her finger, the join party screen floated over to Terry. The zombie hovered his finger just above the join button with a wavering resolve. Just click it. Alice asked impatiently, and the poor zombie stammered, Don't laugh, okay. Fine. With one last wiggle of hesitation, Terry's finger struck true and hit the yes button. Name, Alice Leader. Race, human. Level, 12. STR, 30, DEX, 42, Con, 12, Int, 72, Wis, 56. Weak, slave. Name, unknown. Race, unknown. Level, 281. STR, 259200, DEX, 259200, Con, 259200, Int, 259200, Wis, 259,200. Life force unstable, out of range. Name, Terry. Race, immortal zombie, empowered by unknown. Level, 5. STR 20 DEX 7 Con 999 int 0 WIS 0. Alice stayed silent for a long while. She had no reason to adhere to Terry's warning because nothing about his status was funny. Terry, you are a punching bag. No. Terry covered his hands in shame. How embarrassing. No, 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 no. I don't think you quite understand the situation. Alice clapped her hands as if trying to make Terry focus. You are immortal. With stats like that, you will never die even if you were buried under the ocean or chucked into a volcano. A god could likely slap you in the face and you would still live. Terry sat up a little straighter and puffed out his chest. Maybe I am more incredible than I thought. Dreams of Terry becoming a delver as a child flashed through his mind. He imagined himself reaching the lower floors and taking hit after hit from the boss while manically laughing his head off. Terry. What? I'm not immortal. Terry's frowned. What was this woman saying? She wasn't immortal. Who cares? Oh, yeah. His eyes widened in realization. You aren't immortal. He looked around as his slow brain realized what she was suggesting. Alice clutched her hair in frustration, obviously. She flung her hands towards the heavens, crying to the gods for this zombie to find his one last brain cell and put two and two together. What was the plan here? How were you going to defend me or help me level up? The weakest thing in this forest is C-class, and you are weaker than a fucking stable boy. But the Overlord said it would be fine. A screech that caused both Terry and Alice to reflexively cover their ears interrupted the zombie as a massive shadow turned the surroundings from evening to night. Alice could feel her heart beating loudly in her chest with her hands clamped on her head. She looked around with squinted eyes attempting to spot the threat. It wasn't until she looked up through the tree canopy and saw something black between the network of branches. Then, a moment later, a gust of wind so fierce it tore the few remaining leaves from their branches, and some smaller trees snapped in half and fell to the wayside. As something massive crashed through the trees, loose soil pulsed out from the impact site in a wave and slammed into the poor goblin undead supporting the couch. One maintained their stature, but the other took a knee, causing the whole thing to tip to the side and backwards. Alice found herself lying on her back with stars in her eyes. A violent concussion threatened to steal her consciousness, but she fought through. Oh shit. Terry's words sounded distant and warped. Alice followed his voice, and then she saw something that made her headache vanish in the winter wind. A yellow lizard either size of her head surrounded by Titanic-sized black scales was right above her, only a few meters away. She could almost reach out and touch the magnificent creature. It snorted, and small plumes of smoke wafted from its nostrils. Its mouth revealed shark-like teeth, each longer than Alice's arms and twice as wide as it snarled towards Terry. I smell it on you. The creature proclaimed in a profound voice that shook the land as it turned its barn-sized head towards Terry, who stood there dumbly. Me. Yes, you. It snarled again. I smell the curse of undeath that chains your soul to this plane. Forever and ever, a life of servitude, a vile servant of darkness. The towering creature's claw came round with vigor and snatched Terry up in its grip. Where is your master? He has turned this beautiful forest into a wasteland, and his army threatens my lands. Terry had a defiant grin on his face. Bah. Compared to the Overlord, you are nothing but an overgrown lizard. A large exhale of amusement from the creature whipped Alice's hair as she tried to cower behind the couch. The creature then began to tighten its grip around Terry. Slowly at first, but quickly the colossal lizard's arm bulged, yet nothing happened. Terry was fine, and he couldn't have looked happier. Run, fair maiden. The buffoon hollered at Alice. I will hold back this vile beast. Couldn't you have just stayed quiet, you useless punching bag? Alice hissed as she got up to run. She activated her stealth in a vain attempt to escape the creature's gaze. Alice knew it was futile, but what else could she do? Hopefully, the beast would be more interested in the immortal zombie than her. Sadly, it was not. With a gust of wind and hard scales closing around her body, Alice felt her stomach drop as she was hauled upwards. Her legs dangled freely in the air as crisp winter wind rushed past her face. The canopy was left far behind, and only endless miles of naked trees and frost-covered ground could be seen in all directions. Alice saw Terry in the creature's other claw. The brown-haired zombie returned a grin and a little wave. Mistress, he cupped his hands around his mouth and howled over the wind. Isn't this fun? A real adventure? Please, goddess, bestow upon me a divine quest to kill this fucking idiot. Chapter 10. Undead Evolution. Earlier that morning, after returning to the ice sculptures, Victor ordered the horde of goblins to set the carriages down. He then had Alice rest inside the old carriage used by the head of the merchants. He also made sure a merchant placed a small portion of jerky alongside a water skin next to her. That should be enough for now. Finally, Victor disabled his stealth and appeared before all of his minions. Merchants gather here. All 5 dead men nervously glanced at each other before stepping towards the swirling mass of darkness that had magically appeared. Without straining their necks, they could see tooth and tree trunk-sized legs of a dense black mist that swirled around randomly as if alive. A few couldn't resist and curiously gazed upwards and saw these mysterious legs connected to a vague humanoid-shaped body that towered over the trees. Many blue eyes shone through the canopy and gazed into their souls. "You 5 will be my direct henchmen from now on. Can any of you ride a horse?" Victor planned to find more capable subordinates later, but they were the best he had currently. An awkward standoff with all the merchants casting glances at each other weighed on Victor's patience. Nobody. A man with brown hair and a roughish smirk roughly shoved the largest of the men forward. "Go on, Henry." He cheered his comrade on and gave a nodding thumbs up. The large man stumbled forward. He nervously gulped as he felt the creature's intense gaze land on him. "Thanks for nothing, Terry." "Why the hell did you push me?" Henry hissed over his shoulder as he straightened up. Alas, the culprit hid his hand behind his back and pretended to be sincerely interested in a grey rock on the floor. "Well, I don't see one that smooth every day. A scarce find in such a place. How lucky." Terry bent down and picked up the rock that was neither smooth nor abnormal. It was the same as all the others littering the cursed forest floor. He lifted it and inspected every non-existent nook and cranny before pocketing the thing like a rare treasure. Henry's shoulders dropped in defeat. With a sigh, he faced back towards his new overlord, took a knee and spoke in a clear voice. "My lord, I can ride a horse. How may I serve?" Victor looked at the man, and although his new body didn't have human expressions, he frowned. He should have volunteered immediately. "Under my array's undead skills control, the goblins respond to my requests with haste and efficiency. Is the system interfering with me?" While lost in his thoughts, Henry began to sweat despite the chill in the air. Internally he was berating himself for not stepping forward sooner. Sure, he was no master of horse riding, but out of the 5 men here, he was undoubtedly the best. Victor understood the man's hesitancy to step forward but didn't appreciate it. "Listen up, humans. I have a purpose for each of you, and I need to find the right person for each job. With this body's memories and many months of experimentation, I am sure I can create my own type of undead. I was just missing the final component. The system." Henry placed a hand across his chest and bowed. "As you wish. What is my purpose?" Victor didn't answer. Instead, he used his shadow magic on a nearby horse. Tendrils of shadows shot out from his intangible hands like elongated fingers and wrapped around the horse's body like a lasso. It yelped in surprise as it was hauled through the air. Victor then repeated the process on Henry, and to the merchant's credit, he remained silent as he was brought mere inches away from Victor's many curious eyes. Victor then forcefully placed Henry atop the horse's back. The tendrils of shadows bound the two together. Happy with the progress, Victor sent the tendrils into the horse's nose and severed its brain. Its squealing ceased. The forest returned to its usual stillness. With the horse dead, Victor activated his maxed-out Erase Undead skill. To his surprise, a bizarre-looking UI appeared in his mind. Undead system user detected. Horse corpse and zombie human founder. Merge. A part of Victor's brain leapt with joy. His hunch had been correct. But, unfortunately, the other half was disappointed. Why is the UI so basic? Shouldn't there be more options? Victor prodded the screen, yet nothing changed. No hidden drop-down menus appeared nor any secret buttons. With nothing else to do, Victor hit the merge button. Instantly, his body froze in place. The intangible substance that made up his body rushed toward Henry and swirled around him like the Milky Way. In a panic, Victor conjured his status and saw his numbers declining fast. Luckily he had over 250,000 in each category to spare, but it seemed to create his own undead, he had to sacrifice immense power during the creation process. A few seconds passed and the swirling mass of void mist dissipated, revealing the finished product. New undead created. Name, Henry. Race, Apocalypse Horseman, empowered by unknown. Level 23. STR 230, DEX 160, Con 170, Int 80, Wis 60. Description: a living apocalypse, an unstoppable undead fueled by the void. Victor read the information and was satisfied. Overall, I spent around 1,000 stat points to create such a powerful undead. So far, my sample size of stats involving the system is limited to Alice and me, so it's hard to know if these stats rival the other creatures of this forest or not. I wish the goddess provided me with a down appraisal skill. Victor dropped his new creation. Terry took a nervous step back as Henry slammed down in front of him. The Apocalypse Horseman stood over 2 meters tall with a setup similar to a centaur, except the human torso was further back, allowing room for the horse head. The lower half was a nightmare with midnight black fur, glowing red eyes like enchanted rubies, and a tail of bone similar to a spinal cord. Atop was the human torso that fused with the horse at the waist. Henry now wielded an obsidian spear that gleamed dangerously in the dawn light. His sandy-colored hair had followed with the theme and transformed into a raven cape that ran down his bare back. Dangerous, majestic, downright apocalyptic. Victor could barely hold back his excitement, and neither could the other zombie merchants. All of them, apart from Terry, who seemed a bit lost, took an organized step forward and knelt. Henry, you have evolved with my essence, henceforth you are an Apocalypse Horseman. Serve me well. Victor's ancient voice tickled the ears of all those who listened, and his profound words shook their bones. He could evolve things, they all silently thought. Isn't that something only a god can do? I am honored to oblige. Despite Henry's massive frame that towered over the others, he moved with absolute silence like a phantom through the night as he took his position next to one of Victor's legs. Right, what do I need next? Victor skimmed over the group and singled out a short pot-bellied man with a magnificent beard wearing an apron. Is that a dwarf? Does he cook? I need a chef. Me? The dwarf waddled forward with glee. Name is Bob, Your Excellency. Happy to serve. Without delay, Victor moved his claw and enclosed the dwarf like a bearded bird in a cage. He then activated Raise Undead once more. Undead system user detected. Upgrade. Only one option again, but it's a new one. Upgrade. Victor was curious, so he clicked the button without regret. Initializing random upgrade. Option founder. Bone chef. Merging and upgrading skills. A sudden scream broke Victor's gaze from the interesting screen. His claw cage had transformed into a raging hellfire. Black flame spiraled like a vortex as the mist was rapidly drained from his body. Seconds later, the smell of burnt hair and earth filled the clearing. Victor removed his claw, and all that remained was a very short and bare-looking skeleton. New undead created. Name, Bob. Race, Dwarf Bone Chef, empowered by unknown. Level, 14. STR, 130, DEX, 400, Con, 80, Int 0, Wis 0. Description, a dwarf chef immortalized in pristine bone. Victor felt bad. Compared to Henry, the sight of a shivering skeleton no taller than a child was hard to stomach. Without his magnificent beard and burly muscles, he wasn't as imposing. An awkward minute of silence was broken, with Bob soullessly looking at the floor and trudging back towards the chef carriage. Everyone slowly turned together and watched him leave in silence. Okay, it seems merging an undead with another dead creature to make a chimera brings better results. Although a chef being that pristine is perfect. Wouldn't want a rotting zombie anywhere near the food. I do feel bad for the guy. Anyone else? Victor asked the group. After the Bob incident, he wanted to save at least 2 of them for later experiments, but he also needed to confirm if Bob was a one-off case or not. Perhaps his non-combat class of chef interfered with the ritual and lowered his stats. Although 400 in DEX is still impressive. He should have amazing reflexes and throwing abilities. Maybe throwing knives. Fits the chef aesthetic. 2 men stepped back and left the dazed Terry still staring at Henry. Victor suspected the simpleton had missed the whole ordeal. Terry, step forward. Oh. My turn. The buffoon excitedly walked forward to potential doom. Victor repeated the process he had with Bob and pressed upgrade. Initializing random upgrade. No class or skills found. Analyzing user's potential. None. Potential option found. New undead created. Name, Terry. Race, immortal zombie, empowered by unknown. Level, 5. STR, 20, DEX, 7, Con, 999, Int, 0, Wis, 0. Description, system deemed target too stupid and reckless to assign a combat class. Offensive stats were reduced and traded for defensive ones. Victor was speechless. Terry had a constitution on the same level as a level 1 Netherborne, a godlike creature from the void. Yet he looked so unassuming. Unlike Henry, who had changed drastically, and Bob, who had lost more than he could stomach, Terry was still a rotting zombie. Victor had concluded that the upgrade feature was a massive scam. But this immortal zombie does have a use. He would make the perfect guard if he couldn't ever die. Bob and Terry will look after Alice. She is not a hostage and should be attended to with care. She needs training and some levels once she recovers. The surrounding area is completely cleared of monsters, so you will all be safe now. Only a few critters might appear from time to time. Kill those. Terry did a comical salute and followed after Bob. Victor then turned to his new cavalry unit. Henry, we will head north. An undead on my network has sighted a group of humans wearing impressive-looking gear and have some kind of green metal around their necks. The demonic centaur nodded. As you wish, my lord. The rest of you can rest up for now. And with that, the meeting was adjourned and Victor rushed up towards the north with Henry following close behind.